The observation deck of the Covenant's Pride hummed with the soft whir of life support systems. Daniel pressed his palm against the reinforced polymer window, his breath fogging the surface as he gazed at the debris field spreading before them like a graveyard of metal and dreams. "Still can't believe the Krell did this," Orla said, her mandibles clicking softly in the Thalraxian expression of disgust. She floated beside him in the low gravity, her 6 limbs adjusting naturally to the environment that still made Daniel's stomach churn even after 3 years aboard Coalition vessels. Daniel didn't respond immediately. His eyes tracked the twisted remains of what had been the Outer Rim defense platform, 17,000 souls, evaporated in the Krell's opening salvo of the war. That had been 40 years ago, before he was born, before humanity had proven itself to the galaxy. "The war's over, Orla," he finally said, his voice carrying that flat tone she'd learned to recognize. "Combat fatigue, the medical officers called it. Soul death, the Thalraxians named it more accurately." "Veteran benefits finally came through," she offered, trying to lighten the mood. "You'll be able to retire planetside, maybe one of those ocean worlds you humans seem to prefer." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "Yeah, maybe." The intercom crackled. "Attention, Covenant's Pride. We are approaching Junction Station, docking in 20 minutes. All personnel prepare for standard gravity." Orla's compound eyes studied her human companion. She'd served with Daniel for 5 rotations, watched him earn decorations in 3 major engagements. The Battle of Proxima Threshold, the Siege of Keller's Deep, the final push at Krell Prime itself. She'd seen him do things that defied Coalition combat doctrine, employ tactics that shouldn't have worked but somehow did when humans executed them. "You're thinking about it again," she said quietly. "Always am." Junction Station grew larger in the viewport, a massive ring structure that served as the demilitarization processing center. Thousands of veterans from 100 species passed through here, transitioning from soldiers back to civilians, if they could. The gravity shifted as they docked, and Daniel's boots found purchase on the deck. Orla envied how naturally bipedal species handled the transition. Her own landing was less graceful, though she'd never admit it. The processing took hours. Biometric scans, psychological evaluations, weapons turn-in, identity verification. Daniel moved through it mechanically, answering questions by rote. Orla stayed close, using her diplomatic credentials to bypass most of the bureaucracy. They ended up in a waiting area, surrounded by soldiers from across the Coalition. A Vrexian heavy gunner sat polishing his carapace armor one final time. A squad of Delphine fighter pilots shared stories in their musical language. A human woman, older than Daniel, stared at nothing with eyes that had seen too much. "No, look over there." The voice came from behind them. Another human, gray-haired and weathered, pointing toward one of the large displays showing historical footage. Daniel turned, and Orla watched as every drop of color drained from his face. The display showed archival combat footage from the early war, the Battle of Titan's Gate, one of humanity's first major engagements. The narrator spoke in clipped Coalition standard. Humanity's introduction to modern warfare proved unconventional. Despite technological disadvantages, human forces employed psychological warfare, asymmetric tactics, and a disturbing willingness to sacrifice that unnerved even allied forces. But that wasn't what had frozen Daniel in place. The footage showed a Krell dreadnought, massive and bristling with weapons that could glass planets. And surrounding it, like insects attacking a giant, were dozens of human fighters, tiny, outdated craft that shouldn't have stood a chance. They weren't firing weapons. They were ramming. One after another, human pilots drove their fighters directly into critical points on the dreadnought's hull. Point defense systems obliterated most before impact, but enough got through. The massive ship shuddered, listed, and then split apart in a cascading series of explosions. 18 pilots, the elderly veteran whispered, his voice shaking. 18 kids who volunteered. The Krell never expected it. How could they? What species throws away trained pilots like that? Orla's translator struggled with the human's emotional state. She looked at Daniel, saw his jaw working, his hands clenched into fists. "Daniel," she ventured. "My sister," he said, the words barely audible. "My sister was one of them, Elena. She was 19. The display continued, showing the aftermath. The coalition military analysts discussing the unexpected tactical innovation. The Krell command hierarchies struggling to adapt to an enemy that didn't value individual survival the way every other sapient species did. The turning point when the Krell realized they were fighting something they didn't understand. "They called it the Titan's Gate Gambit," Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger but no less hollow. "Made it sound strategic, noble. They gave them all medals posthumously." He turned to Orla, and she saw something in his eyes that terrified her, not anger but a profound exhaustion. "Do you know what Elena's last transmission said?" Orla shook her head, her mandibles tight. "Tell Danny I'm sorry I'll miss his birthday." Daniel's laugh was broken. She was apologizing. As she pointed her fighter at a ship 50,000 times her mass, she was worried about missing my 10th birthday. The old veteran had approached, drawn by Daniel's words. "You're Elena Reeves' brother." Daniel nodded. "I served on the Defiant. We were there. After the battle I helped recover the—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The remains. We found her flight recorder. She never wavered, flew straight and true." "They all did," another voice joined in. A human woman, the one with the 1,000-yard stare, stood up. "My husband was there too, Pilot Rakesh Chen. He used to say humanity's greatest advantage wasn't our technology or our tactics. It was that we'd already accepted we were dead. Every human who joined the military knew the statistics, knew the Krell were technologically superior, knew our survival rate was less than 40%, and we enlisted anyway." Orla felt something cold settle in her thorax. She'd fought beside humans, trusted them with her life, but she'd never truly understood. The coalition species fought to survive. Humans fought as if they'd already died. "Is that true?" she asked Daniel. When you enlisted, did you expect to die?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Every human soldier writes their will during basic training. It's mandatory. They make us record goodbye messages to our families, just in case." He met her eyes. "So yeah, we all knew." The elderly veteran nodded. The Krell couldn't comprehend it. Their warriors fought for honor and advancement. The Thalraxians fight for colony and queen. The Vrexians fight for territory. But humans, we fight because we've already decided the cause is worth dying for. That decision gives us an edge. We're not afraid of tactics other species won't consider because they can't justify the cost. "That's horrifying," Orla whispered. "That's why we won," the woman, Chen's widow, said simply. "The Krell broke first, not because they couldn't fight, because they couldn't understand an enemy that treated death as an acceptable opening position in negotiations." The display had moved on to other historical footage, but the group remained, bound by the weight of understanding. Junction Station bustled around them with thousands of veterans, but in that moment they were isolated in their shared truth. Daniel finally moved, breaking the spell. "I need air." Orla followed him to one of the observation platforms. Earth hung in the distance, blue and white and beautiful, the death world that had produced a species terrifying enough to end a war the coalition had been losing for decades. "You're wondering if you still know me," Daniel said without turning. "I'm wondering if I ever did," Orla admitted. "The war's over," Daniel repeated his earlier words. "We can go back to being the friendly, cooperative species everyone wants us to be, trade partners, cultural exchange, scientific collaboration." He paused. "But they'll remember. Every species in the coalition will remember what we're capable of when threatened." "Is that what you wanted?" Orla asked. "To be feared?" No, Daniel said, and the sadness in his voice was genuine. I wanted my sister to make it to my birthday party, but we don't always get what we want. He turned to face her fully. The Krell learned that lesson, the hard way. Orla looked at her friend, because despite everything, that's what Daniel was, and saw both the gentle human who had shared his ration packs when her shipment was delayed, and the soldier who had single-handedly held a corridor against 30 Krell warriors while his squad evacuated. Humanity, she realized, wasn't terrifying because they were cruel or savage. They were terrifying because they could be both kind and ruthlessly pragmatic, often simultaneously. They could mourn their losses and still calculate whether those losses were worth the gain. Come on, she said, gently touching his arm with one of her limbs. Processing is done. Let's find you that ocean world. Daniel nodded, taking one last look at the debris field that had started the conversation, at Earth that had ended the war, and at the future that neither of them could quite see clearly yet. Yeah, he said, let's go home.